Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, a place to find connection and a sense of belonging, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about sensitivity and the richness that it adds, the strengths we have because of our sensitivity, and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. Today's episode is something that's really special to me. A childhood friend of mine, Kitty McCormick, we reconnected after many, many years on Facebook, and she ended up taking the Online HSP course. And so we had a chance to get together after the course was over and to talk about how we were as kids. And we never really processed any of this. We both had a tremendous amount of anxiety as kids. I had no idea she had anxiety. She had no idea I had anxiety. We talk about specifically some of our fears, and she had to change schools a lot as a child. Her father was a prominent person. We talk about this during the interview. And because she was very shy, it was very common for parents to put their kids into acting, and she would be picked up from school to do auditions, and she hated it. We also talk about that sense of being in a group of other people, and for Kitty being an introvert, that sense of being invisible. And we both talk about how when we're in a group that just doesn't work for us, that negative chatter comes up, and the more it comes up, the more we kind of feel even more invisible. We talk about meds, anxiety, depression, ways that we've managed over the years. I think this is really going to be a very interesting episode. We also talk about, Kitty talks about her experience working with therapists who were not HS knowledgeable and how that was for her. I have to say, if you can hang in past the first, I think it's about 10 minutes. I'm not always so great about warming people up, and we just talk a little bit more about our history, and I think it gets a little bit meatier after about the first 10 minutes. I'm not sure exactly how long it is, but I do think it's a great episode. I think it's worth listening to, especially if you're an introvert, you experience anxiety, you've been on meds, you've been in therapy. I don't know. I think you're really going to like it. What I'm going to do differently with this episode is if you want to go to the show notes at unapologeticallysensitive.com and scroll down, Kitty has a tremendous background. She's a therapist. She's worked with kids. She really has a very strong background, but I'm going to let you read her bio. It's in the show notes. So if you're listening on Apple iTunes, you can just scroll down and read her bio. At the end, if you're listening to this in live time, this is airing on January 7th, 2020. Happy New Year, everybody. There's still time to enter for a free drawing to win registration for the Online HSP course, but if you're listening in real time, you've got to do it pretty quickly because I'm going to do a drawing on Sunday, January 12th. I'm going to tell you how you can do that at the end of this. If you're enjoying the show, please share it with other people, share it on social media, tell other people about it. If you don't mind rating and reviewing, it really helps people find the podcast. And now, on to the show. Hey, Kitty, how are you?
Hey, I'm good.
Thanks for being here today.
You're welcome.
We've known each other for a heck of a long time.
That's true.
I'm trying to think, what grade was it that we met in?
We were in 6th grade. I remember that very well because that was a new school for me.
Oh, I don't think I realized that. Okay.
Yep.
After 6th grade, I moved to San Diego. So you and I lost touch and really connected over Facebook in the last couple of years, but didn't really talk until this year. We did a Zoom call just to say, hey.
Yeah. I remember connecting with you the way I did with a number of friends when I first got on Facebook. Like, we were kind of surprised that we both were therapists. And then it was just kind of like some years later, I would kind of see your stuff and we would like each other's stuff. But yeah, it took a while before we actually talked.
Yeah. I remember really enjoying spending time with you. It felt like it was just safe being with you. I know I spent the night at your house a couple times. You spent the night at my house.
Yes. Those were great times. It was funny because I, and this is like going back a ways, but I remember having a kind of a circle of friends, and we weren't necessarily in the immediate circle of each other's friends, but we connected to each other. And it was like, hey, come spend the night at my house. That was really cool for me because I didn't do that with a lot of kids in all of the grades of elementary school. Well, I really wasn't in any particular school long enough to do that. So I think I usually did just have kind of like a one or two really close friends, and I kind of hung out with them like for that whole year, maybe for 2 years if I was at a school that long. So I didn't kind of reach outside of that little group, but I did with you. And I remember like activities even. It was fun.
Yeah, I didn't like being away from home, and I'm trying to think about at what age that changed for me, but I really preferred to be at home. I did not like being outside of my house, maybe going to a friend's house, but not spending the night. And I don't know if that changed, if that was just with you or if that was just by sixth grade, but like home was really the place that I wanted to be most of the time.
That's interesting because I would never have picked up on that. And I think I was pretty aware about friends and just their personalities, just even as a kid. I understand why now, not so much then. I think I felt really comfortable with you. So I'm pretty sure I didn't pick up on any of that stuff. I do remember like kind of just getting into just discovering things in like the closet of my bedroom because it was my closet, but my mom's stuff was in there. So it was just kind of fun. We were just kind of rummaging around, and that's something that I just did with like a lot of friends. Maybe play Barbies, but not really, go into the closet and look for, lost treasure.
You had a huge closet. From my standards, your room was huge. I think you had 3 twin beds in it.
Yeah, that's right.
And the closet was huge compared to where I lived.
Yeah, well, there were different configurations depending on what was going on in the house. But yeah, that around that time there would have been 3 twin beds. That's right. And the closet was even huge for me because I had clothes in there, but it was just like a little section. And then my mom, who was a teacher, had so much of her stuff in my big closet because it was a perfect space for her stuff, a lot of it.
Yeah, yeah. And your dad was a newscaster, so I kind of felt like you were famous, he was famous.
And he was just dad. Yeah. People would say that and I'd be like, yeah, huh? Like, he's just dad like everybody else is, right?
Yeah. Why don't we give him a shout out in case anybody's in our generation?
Hey, Larry McCormick, Channel 5 KTLA, News 10.
Yeah. When did you find out you were a highly sensitive person?
It's so crazy, this journey. I found out like kind of about 20 years ago when I first saw Elaine Aron's book. I do have an anxiety disorder that I've been diagnosed with, general anxiety disorder. And so I kind of was gravitating towards things. I kind of flipped through the book or read the back and I thought, oh yeah, this is kind of me. And then it stayed on my shelf for years. I would see it over the years and just kind of go, yeah, that's me. As a matter of fact, I went to, and I think I told you about this, 1 or 2 meetings, like either in the late 90s or the early 2000s. And that was not long after her book was like first published. So the meetings, I think, are a little different then than they are now. And they were just support group meetings. And I think what I gathered from them was kind of like, yeah, I'm weak and delicate because I'm really sensitive and I shouldn't be around loud people. But I probably could get more in just my regular kind of anxiety disorder support group. Yeah, that was just a long way of saying that's when I first found out about it. It wasn't until much later that I really took a deep dive and found out way more about it.
Yeah, I didn't know I was a highly sensitive person until the last couple of years. And I would say I was a pretty anxious kid, but I don't think I ever picked up on your anxiety.
It's so interesting because I've had a number of friends tell me that, especially when I say that I was just painfully shy as a child. Friends have told me that's not true. No, you? No. And it's like, yes, I was. But that only came out with strangers and with people that I did not let into my life, my circle. people I didn't know, people who were like, I don't know, maybe authority figures like teachers or adults. It's funny you say that you were that. I there was no way I'd ever have picked up with that trait with you at all. I didn't see that at all. But yeah, I was an anxious child.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can remember there were break-ins in the area that I lived in, and I can remember being under the covers at night and practicing breathing in case somebody broke in so that they wouldn't know that I was in bed. I think that's how my anxiety showed up. I had a really strong need to connect, and I think that's always been my saving grace. And knowing now that I'm a highly sensitive extrovert, like I just wanted to connect with people, and it made me feel so good. But being away from home, like I hated sixth grade camp. I was so freaking homesick. I hated it. I hated being away for that long. It was not a fun experience. So I think that those are the ways that anxiety showed up for me, maybe not so much in relationship when I was relating with people, but yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. When you speak about those kinds of circumstances, I think I was always with a friend. And when I wasn't, especially overnight camps, I don't know if I could have done that if I didn't go with a friend. My one thing my mom did was she always made sure that I would go to like Y camp, or basically those are the camps that we would go to with friends. So, and we were always like scheduled to be in the same cabins. That made it much easier. And it was at an age where it was okay to just kind of cling together and stick around. And that would have been much harder, like I guess in high school or junior high school, where, kids are kind of like mingling with a lot of different other kids. That would have been very hard for me. But so I get that.
Well, it's interesting. Two things. I can remember at night having a hard time falling asleep and looking at the clock and counting on my fingers how few hours I would get until I had to get up, like feeling really anxious about that. And going to summer camp, my mom worked full time. And so the bus would come and pick me up at my house. And oftentimes I didn't want to go and I wouldn't answer the door. I had so many stomach aches as a kid. I just somatically things felt like they were just too much. And so I remember in the morning needing to tell my mom I didn't feel well because I wanted to stay home and feeling so anxious about that. But it was really like I just felt like I couldn't deal.
It's so weird. Like we have the exact same childhood. It's weird to me because I think part of what was happening with me is, so again, my mom was a teacher, and during that period of time in the 70s, there was this thing called the open classroom that she was trying to replicate, or trying to find programs that replicated here. It was kind of something that was founded in England, and it was kind of like kids kind of get a chance to go at their own pace and do what they want to at whatever times they want to. It's a structured open program, but here in the States, it was something totally different. And so she kept trying to find it. And the way she did was taking me out of schools and placing me in other schools, which was horrible for me because I had to keep going to new elementary schools. And every morning before school in a new school, I would have these horrible stomach aches. It's just like I didn't understand really why, but it was all based on the nerves of going to this new place. Even when it was, months in, that was still happening. I also had similar, and this kind of continues on today, problems with insomnia. But when I was younger, staring at the clock, I remember the digital clock, because that was like I remember my 70s digital clock, and seeing the numbers flip to the next minute and the next minute, and just knowing that I only had so many hours to go, kind of falling asleep maybe half an hour before it was time to get up, and just being exhausted in the morning. Yeah, just the nerves of having to get up for the new day. It's so difficult.
Yeah. And these are things that I've never talked about with anybody, not for any reason other than there wasn't a context for it to come up with, and never told my mom about this stuff. I mean, she obviously knew I had stomach aches all the time, but really never talked about how anxious. And I think the thing is that I internalized so much of it, and I really felt like how I showed up in the world was not okay. Who I was not okay. I didn't fit in. I didn't belong. And I think the protective factor is that I always seem to have at least one best friend, and that that connecting was really important. That and books. I think books saved my life. And my mom was really into creativity. So we did baking and I did craft classes. And so there were some protective factors there in spite of the fact of me always saying, what I didn't get.
Oh yeah, no, it's funny. So I grew up in a home where my dad was a broadcast journalist, but slash actor. So he was in a lot of, different movies and on television, and his friends were all in that kind of group. So the kids of those parents were kind of doing that themselves. They all had agents. They all were going on auditions and having these series, getting work like that. And they kind of took on the personalities of their parents. Well, I didn't, but my parents thought this is going to be a good thing. You and your brother are going to start going to auditions, and you're going to start doing commercials, and you're going to be on television. And imagine me doing that. Yeah, that I think my parents, I know they loved me. So this is, not to bash my parents, but I think there were things in during my childhood that just were kind of layered on top of that trait that made my life so scary at times, just having to be in a new school and getting picked up and hearing my mom say, we have 10 minutes to get ready for this audition that you're going to, in like, we have to be there in 30 minutes in the Valley. That was when you could get like from LA to the Valley in 30 minutes. And, just like, be ready. And then just, once we get there, I want to hear you being bubbly and excited. And I want to hear your voice through that door, just like I heard all the other kids' voices. And that's what I didn't get, that's a part. That's just such a small part of it. And it was not, they were just being parents, just being like, this is like what all our friends' kids are doing. This is perfect. This is like, it's a great thing for you. And if you're a little shy, this will help.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know about you. I've done an incredible amount of healing work with my mom. We added on, she lives with us, and, we've talked about it. She has the capacity to, we've processed through it, and she did the best job that she could. And I'm sure with my kids, I've done stuff that at some point they'll figure out was probably not helpful. And if they need to come back and talk to me, I just think we do the best job that we can with what we have. And now that I'm an adult, if I have healing to do, it's my responsibility to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I always have known that my parents, love me, and they were always trying to do that. That's been a part of my work for sure, to pull that out and to feel resentful at the appropriate things, to bring certain things up with my parents in a loving way, but just to be able to process some of that stuff with them and tell them at the same time that, I know you guys love me. I know that you would never have done anything that you just knowingly to hurt me. But this is part of my work. And this is what I'm doing with it.
Right. And I had actually forgotten that I did go through a period where I was very angry and frustrated. We grow up thinking that we got what we wanted. We can't figure out why we struggle. Then we get into therapy and we realize where some of those wounds came from. And then there's that grief and that loss and that disappointment and anger and frustration that we didn't have what we thought we had. We grieve it, we feel it, we do what we need to do. And then we have the opportunity to create a new kind of relationship with our parents if they have the capacity to do that. So I forget to be mindful that some people are currently in that stage where they're feeling really angry and disappointed with their parents. Some people have parents that they will never be able to do the repair work with. So I forget. I just want to be mindful about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I do remember that. I remember being a young adult and being very angry and first, getting into it all, because you that's when you do realize, well, this stuff didn't just come out of the blue. There were reasons for it. But yeah, just you do have to work through that and continue that work. I think some people kind of stop right there, and maybe that's, I don't know, that could be some reasons for difficulties or strained relationships with parents, but get to a place of compassion, and I've reached that place, and it's all is fine now.
Right.
I still understand what happened and how this came on, and I can look back at it and go, wow, yeah, that wasn't great. But I get it. I understand.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think of the term highly sensitive person?
Well, so I don't have a problem with it. All right. I never really had a problem with it. I always thought, yeah, I can relate to that. I think until recently, I've started to have some issues with it. I think I kind of just naturally saw myself as being highly sensitive. So that was just kind of like, okay, yeah, that's what I am. I was so connected to this person who has an anxiety disorder that, so I think that's already coming from a place of being disordered or being weak. It's already kind of like there's a negative connotation attached to it. So the sensitivity part didn't bother me so much. Ironically, now that I look at myself as having the anxiety disorder because of the highly sensitive trait and not really getting my needs met at the time, therefore the anxiety disorder came on, I now have some issues with that term, highly sensitive. I think it's just because society has put some negative kind of there's so I guess I'm struggling with this. Society has some negative views, I guess, about being sensitive. I don't personally, but it bothers me that people think of being sensitive as being weak.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the issue I have with it. I don't know. I'm a little conflicted about how I feel about that.
Is there another term that you wish were used instead of highly sensitive?
I've thought about it, and I think the things that I think about when I think of who I am, I think that I'm highly aware, or maybe there's an intuitiveness there.
Mm-hmm.
Sensory perception is part of it. So I
Mm-hmm.
still claim highly sensitive. It's just, I don't feel, bad about saying that. It doesn't make me feel, afraid of describing myself in that way to somebody else, or, when I'm describing that trait, I've used it and haven't had any kind of, gotten any kind of fear of judgment from other people when using it. So, but I know that other people have, and I think that's why I'm just a little more aware of that now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm doing this little shift of a perspective, and there'll be an upcoming episode with Ariana Smith where we're going to talk about this more. So I don't want to talk about it too much, but I think as we learn about our traits and how we show up in the world, it doesn't matter what we call it because we own what we want and what we need. So it doesn't matter that I tell you I'm a highly sensitive person. What I can tell you is if we go out, I want to go somewhere where it's a little on the more quiet side, where it's more intimate. That's what works better for me. I'm good for 2 hours. I don't have to say, I'm a highly sensitive person and bright lights and loud noises bother me. And I can't be in a loud venue because it's too much. I can be clear on what I want, and I can communicate with that. And because that's what my need is, that's where the validity is. But I think that when we first learn about the trait, again, it's another way that we externalize. I'm a highly sensitive person, therefore this is what I need, as opposed to this is how I came into the world and this is what works for me.
Right. This is just the way I'm wired. I like to say that this is the way I'm wired, and it's not a bad thing. But I'm learning to say that more, especially like with friends and with my husband. I'm learning to just kind of state that up front.
Mm-hmm.
Without having to go into the whole thing, like feeling like I have to wear a t-shirt with the whole definition on the front of it,
Right. And whatever stage we're at, I think that we do it however we need to do it. And if you would have asked me 6 months, a year ago, I'm proud to be highly sensitive. I think it comes with amazing gifts and traits. And as I'm learning and growing, how I communicate about it is just different.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah. I think that's what will happen with me. This is fairly new after going through the course, taking that kind of dive into it and looking at it more deeply, learning all these new little pieces and facets to it. So it's just not just the DOES, but all these other little things that, sensation seeking, introversion as opposed to extroversion, and all of this stuff that comes along with it. I'm learning all of this stuff. And so I'm learning, just how to verbalize certain things about myself too, and how to set boundaries because of that, where I didn't really understand why I had to set a boundary. And maybe even I was setting boundaries by excusing myself for being weak or something that was more negative. Maybe, setting it in a negative way. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right. And you just took the online HSP course that I teach.
Yep.
So for anybody that's listening, just to feel like I always have to make this disclaimer, it's not a therapeutic course. It's an educational course. We learn about the trait. It's a chance for you to be around other HSPs. So if anybody's has their hackle set because of a conflict of interest or a dual relationship, it's okay. And I think that's my projection, that, that's what my projection is. So I think I need to own that, as that's my fear that people will judge or misinterpret that I'm doing something unethical. So you finished the online HSP course. How was the experience for you?
Oh my goodness. It was just incredible. I mean, with each meeting, so at the end of each meeting, I had to run off to my mother's house. I would get to my mom's house, call my husband, and just tell him just all of these wonderful things I was learning about myself. So he was kind of learning along with me, and he just said, pull that book down off of the shelf and just, I need to start reading this book because I just want to know who this person is. You're just beaming. And it's like, well, it's true. It was great. It helped me realize something about myself. It helped me realize that, yes, I have anxiety, and this is so huge, and it probably doesn't even sound that big, but I have anxiety because of this trait. That to me is just so major because I see myself in a much more positive light. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just like a kind of weakness is taken away from me. Yeah, I still have anxiety, and I have an anxiety disorder. I'm also kind of wondering if I can kind of work through to a place where I know how to deal with my anxiety in a way that I don't have the disorder anymore, if that makes sense. Because I know what I need, whereas before it's just kind of like rush headlong into projects at work and just know that, okay, the disorder is going to flare and use your coping mechanisms because that's what you learned in support group for anxiety. Whereas now I take things so differently. It's like, no, that is not going to work for me. I need to change my schedule around there because I'm wired that way, and I'm not going to do all of that and then go to that party. Even though that's a good friend of mine and I said I was going to, and I all of those obligations, those are changing for me. They're changing slowly. I mean, I haven't become a new person overnight, but
right. So
worked for that.
What I hear you saying is, before you understood about the trait of high sensitivity and you felt like something was wrong with you because you had this anxiety disorder, now you see, I probably have this as a result of being a highly sensitive person. It's how I'm wired. Instead of feeling like it's a deficit or there's something wrong with me, I understand why I have it. There are some workarounds to really minimize when it comes up. I still, at this point, can't control how much anxiety I have, but there are lots of things that I can do to make it more manageable. And when it comes up, I understand it so it doesn't feel like this crazy, mysterious thing that I have no control over.
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's exactly what you're hearing me say. And that's a big piece that I got from this course. I could not get that from an anxiety skills, coping skills kind of, course or support group even. I could get, compassion and, get people understanding what it feels like to have high anxiety and get some coping skills for when it comes on. And there are probably non-HSPs in those kinds of groups too, because everybody has anxiety and, non-HSPs they get panic attacks. So that's just a group for how to deal with panic attacks, not, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. And I think that when we don't understand the trait of being highly sensitive, I mean, I was trying to debate if I really want to hear what you have to say, but I think this is really important to this conversation. I was diagnosed with anxiety. I was diagnosed with depression. I was diagnosed with ADHD, and I was medicated for all all three of those things. And I was on medication for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Then I learned about the trait. No, I did not learn about the trait of being highly sensitive first. I went to a nutritionist a few years ago, changed my diet,
Mm-hmm.
learned about kind of what was going on, learned about the trait of high sensitivity. I think I actually went off all my meds before I learned about being a highly sensitive person. I worked with a nutritionist and, like I said, changed my diet, took some supplements, learned about the trait of being highly sensitive, and really reframed my whole experience of how I went through my life. For me, and if you're on meds and you need to be on meds, I'm not vilifying them.
Sure.
Everybody has a different path. And so I really want people to honor that. But I want to share what my experience is because I think it's just another perspective that I still go through periods where I've got, I'm more anxious. I often will wake up in the middle of the night. I can't go back to sleep. So I keep a book by my bed. I, pull the covers over my head and I read under the covers for a couple of hours so I can fall back asleep. Sometimes I can put myself back to sleep. I have periods where I find that I want to label it as depression, but I really have to look at what's really going on. It comes, it goes. And because I'm really okay with those are the rhythms that I have, that it really doesn't disrupt my life. I don't feel like it prevents me from living my life. It's just part of how I'm wired. It's what I've talked about. I have times when I'm more expansive, where I'll be making videos and you'll see me on social media. And then times when I don't make videos for a while because I'm just feeling like I need time to recoup.
Exactly.
So I think that there's a lot of power in, if I didn't know those things, I would go oh my God, I'm having a time of depression, or I'm having a time of anxiety, or I can't focus and it's ADHD, as opposed to just naming what's going on and figuring out what I need to do. Is my life perfect and namaste kumbaya all the time? No, it's not.
Right.
If I'm going to be alive and I'm human, I'm going to have ups and downs. I'm going to have things that are distressing to me, but I don't, for the most part, don't seem to lose my sense of self. And when I have those periods where I'm lower energy, I refer to it as depleted. I don't even like to say depressed, but I recognize who I am, what my strengths are, and my energy is low, and maybe my thinking isn't as great, or I'm a little bit more unplugged. But I think it, for me, has really made a difference, and I feel so much more empowered, and I don't feel pathologized. And I feel like the people that diagnosed me did not understand the trait. With all the things that we go through, we have a lot to be depressed and anxious about.
So true. Absolutely. Yeah. I just so agree with what you just said. Yeah. I just had I call them anxiety periods when I go through, these, and it's just kind of when I, in the past would be in one, it was just one of those unfortunate things that just happens in the life of Kitty. Just, I go through anxiety periods because what happens is a bad anxiety attack or maybe it's gone on to being a full-blown panic attack happens. And then there's the fear of another one happening and all of that stuff. And so then, and it takes every little tool that I can use to get back to my baseline. And that's just going to be me. But, looking at what happened up to those points, and especially now looking back on what happened up to that point? And what happened up to that point, and just looking back over my life during these big periods of anxiety periods, I see exactly how I walked right into those. And I have to say too, and I'm fine with saying I've been on medication because I was diagnosed that way. And I think that's kind of what doctors and psychiatrists do. They just kind of go, oh, that's what you're having? Okay, take this for that. And that happens very regularly. It's a common thing. I'm just seeing how that could probably possibly change, as long as I keep doing this work, how that can kind of change for me in the future. Because I see how I can maneuver my life. And I've changed my life ironically, even before taking this course, I was already starting to change things in my life because things were becoming kind of unbearable the way they were. I changed the place where I was working, and because of the people who were kind of involved with that particular workplace, I had to change that because it was just making me nuts. I was kind of already shifting, and now knowing more about this trait, I see other things that I can do and put in place, or just ways that I can take better care of myself when I know that I'm going into a busier mode, or when I see a big transition coming up, things that I can kind of do to help myself through that.
Right.
It's the work.
I do want to say, if you're listening and you're on medication, please do not go off your medication without having a solid plan and with the help of your medical provider. And I will say that I talked to my psychiatrist about going off meds. He was very, very discouraging about it. And I finally decided to do it. Had I done it the way that he told me, it would have been disastrous for me. I did research outside of what he did, and I did a much longer taper off than what he had said because I knew that it was going to be harder on me. While Kitty and I are talking about our experiences, please be mindful about how you do it. And neither one of us are advocating to go on medication, to get off medication. We're just sharing our experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So going back to the course, was there anything unexpected that you got from the course that you were surprised about?
What I think happened, which was just like, it's never really happened for me in any other group setting, is the closeness and connection with the other group members. It makes total sense now, but I didn't expect to feel that sense of connection until I understood it as we were going along, especially as we were getting into the educational piece about how it's important to have deep connections and like the kind of like small talk kind of stuff with strangers, and being in bigger groups is kind of difficult because that's the way it's always been for me. And as I said before, I always had like my small group of friends around me, whoever they were at different parts of my life. Making that bond so quickly with 4 other people was pretty astonishing for me. I mean, we're still close. As a matter of fact, we're meeting later this evening. I mean, we're still, and this is all online too. That's another thing. It's not even in person. It's more proof to me of the characteristics of this trait, that this is true. This is how things work for me. This is how I work best with other people.
Mm-hmm.
It was something else that was just proven to me. And that's been a wonderful thing, actually. It's been an addition to my life.
And you're a therapist, so you already have a high level of skill around knowing how to connect with people, knowing how to attune with people. How was it for you? Have you ever been in a group of 5 or 6 other people and had this kind of a connection?
No. What normally happens with me in groups of strangers is I kind of disappear. And this is like psychoeducational groups, in support groups, in group therapy even. And in group therapy, you're actually, kind of called out sometimes by the facilitator. And it's funny because one of the reasons why I've like looked to being a part of group is to kind of get a better feel of being in a group situation and feel more comfortable in group situations. But I've always found myself disappearing in those situations and just kind of falling back and allowing other people in the group to come forward. And in this particular group, I think I really like how the tone was set that it's okay to speak, it's okay to not speak, it's okay to do whatever you want. Because I think what happened as well is when I would become invisible and not speak, then I started feeling bad, feeling like, okay, here I go again. I'm not good enough to say anything. I'd start getting all of those negative feelings about not being as good as those people being better than me, stronger than me, more aggressive than me, which is supposedly a good thing. Which I actually don't believe that's a good thing, but I just don't have the wherewithal to do that. And in this group, if I didn't want to speak, none of those gremlins, as you call them, none of them came up for me. When I did want to say something, I felt completely supported. And I think that's why the connection was so strong. That was great, actually.
Thank you. I think there's such an unspoken expectation that we're supposed to show up in the world like non-sensitive extroverts, which means we should be talkative and we should be engaging and that if we do anything other than that there's some kind of a deficit. And even as a highly sensitive extrovert, if you put me in a group of people I don't know and I have to fight for attention, I'm going to be very quiet. I'm going to try and figure out where I fit in and where I belong. And
right.
This course is so much about really learning to tune into what's going on for you, who's showing up, what do you need, and really, really honoring that and creating a space for that. And I think that when we do that, then we're okay with however we show up because I've had that thing where like I'm not participating, I'm invisible. And the more I talk to myself about it, the worse I feel until like I'm if I could be invisible, I would be.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think, the work for me is to get to the place where if I am in a group of non-HSP extroverts and that gets pointed out, which it has, it's like, why are you so quiet? You never say anything, all of that. With me just being okay with that because I don't want to share anything right now. And just letting whatever that is roll off my back because that's just who I am and doesn't mean that they're better than me. I'm in the minority of people in the world. And so in a group like that, I'm going to stand out. But that work for me is to learn to feel okay with even with people like just saying out loud, just commenting on my behavior and calling it out and asking about it. And just stating that it's okay.
Yeah, I think as we start to know what our traits are and we see them as strengths and we view the world from our perspective, not from an extroverted, non-highly sensitive person's perspective, we can go like, I'm just listening. I'm just observing.
Right.
What does that bring up for you?
Exactly. Throw it back to you.
Yeah, because I think we often take those comments as there's something wrong with us, but that's just, again, that extroverted, non-highly sensitive lens. And there's more than one perspective to a story.
Yeah. And you've been fed that for your whole life. And it's not just your parents feeding you that. It's everything that's coming at you. This is the way it should be. It's the way you should be.
Right. So we have an opportunity to claim it as a trait and as a strength so that we don't take on that feeling that something's wrong with us, because somebody may mean it in a negative way and they may not, but it's how we take it on or we don't even take it on.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I'm sure that there were moments when people would ask, even kids would ask me that sometimes, where they were genuinely curious, like being in the minority, being an HSP is part of that minority. It's a genuine question, like, why are you so quiet? It's like, because all those voices in your head that come up, all those negative voices.
Right. What are some of the major takeaways from the course? Because it's been a few weeks now since your group ended. What comes up for you, or what do you think of that you got out of it?
I think the major thing that I got out of the course is that there are a lot of beautiful pieces to this trait, that it's not a disorder, that it is simply a trait. The wiring is differently. The way we are wired is just, it's not bad. It's just different. Because of that, there are things that we have to kind of be more tuned to in our environment and be more aware of. I think that has been like one of the biggest things for me that I got out of this, because I kind of know how to care for myself when I'm feeling on edge or kind of nervous. All of that stuff I've already that I kind of knew. I think one of the things that I went into the group thinking was that I was going to kind of just get some skills that I kind of already knew, but maybe I would learn a little bit more highly sensitive stuff. But what I really pulled is that actually there's a lot of research backing this up. This is a very real trait. My brain works a little bit differently. I have to kind of treat my lifestyle in that way, my environment in that, in a particular way that kind of, takes care of that and takes care of myself. And I think that's kind of like the biggest piece for me,
And going into this as a therapist, having read Dr. Aaron's book, were there things you learned about the trait or about being highly sensitive that you didn't know coming into the group?
Oh, yeah. I think the biggest thing, and it kind of just goes back to just the way our brains are. I didn't know that that there was that much of a research base on that. The neurology was like such a big part of this. I really had no idea that that it was this significant. That I didn't know that this ran throughout many species in the animal kingdom. I mean, that was very surprising for me. The ideas of extrovert as opposed to the introvert and what that whole thing means, that there are extroverts who have this trait. I just had no idea that it ran that deep, or that, that I could be a high sensation seeking introverted HSP. I mean, there's just all of these layers. Matter of fact, there's so many layers to this that after the group, I decided to go back into therapy with an HSP therapist, because one thing I realized, interestingly enough, with therapy in the past is that I always kind of had a wall up with my therapist, because I was always seeking approval in some form, which is like, they were able to help me in some way. As a matter of fact, I've kind of talked with my new therapist about this, who's an HSP, and man, we hit it off like right away. The first session, I was just like, I always had a wall up, and I was just trying to do exactly what the therapist was telling me to do. And then I would report back, yes, I actually did this, I actually did that, and thought, well, therapy just really isn't for me. I always made these assumptions, just kind of like going into the course, making assumptions that, okay, I'll probably learn some more coping skills, and for me, more things about myself. And so that's why I wanted to be able to dig deeper with someone who I could trust more, and not have to get the approval of.
Sure. And in the way that you and I were talking about some of our anxieties when we were kids, and I've never really talked about that before, I saw that come up a lot in group. Let me let you speak to that. Did you end up hearing people talk about things that you're like, oh, that's an HSP thing? I do that too. Did you have that experience?
Yeah, I have that experience a lot. And also on HSP boards, when people share something that they do or they feel when they're in a new circumstance, or when something happens at work, if somebody has said something to them, or if something is, if they're considering like a transition in their lives because of the way a work situation or an environment is, there were things that they were kind of like, our stories are so similar. It's kind of like if it was a book, it'd be the same book, it's like we're running along the same path. I totally get what you're saying. And I think that was part of the reason why we could be so supportive of each other. Just interesting stuff. The stimuli would like just being sensitive to things in the environment. I didn't even realize that I was sensitive to certain things, like just clothes, certain types of clothes, and light, things that were just like, oh yeah, of course, that's what that means. Oh, barometric pressure, that's my migraines are all, I'm starting to just realize so many little things and pulling them in. It's just so, it really is, because there are all these little layers that just keep getting pulled back. And then it's like, oh, that's related to that trait. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so maybe I need to watch that then. Maybe I need to pull back on that, or just don't pressure myself so much into doing that activity, or being with that group of friends so much. Or it's okay to say no. Big one.
Yeah. We're getting to the point where we need to start wrapping up. I have a couple more questions to ask you. If someone's thinking about the course, but they're thinking, I know about being an HSP, I know about the trait, I've done this kind of stuff before. Is there any perspective that you might be able to offer that they might not be aware of, just a different perspective?
I think you'll learn so much from the course. There's so much there that you can just pick up and become knowledgeable about. But it's the interconnections that you make with the group members that at least that was my experience, that will bring everything full circle and make you understand just the way things play out, make you understand a little bit more about the material. I think you get a lot of that in each group member's story. Even though the stories are not like 100% the same, we don't even come from the same kind of backgrounds necessarily. We're not the same types of people. The groups are very diverse, at least ours was. I think because of that trait, you'll be able to understand the material that's being presented to you all the more. So I think it's really important to, and you could probably find that information in books and stuff out there and read it and go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But when you're kind of doing an interactive online course with other people, I think it just makes it just real, more real. And the connection is unbelievable. It's quite magical, actually.
Thanks. Is there anything else that you want to share that I didn't ask you about?
I think it was really fun having this chat. It's great. Like reconnecting yet again.
I know. It was fun having you in the group too. I love doing group work, and I don't think that I realized how much I love doing group work. The dynamics are just amazing. And I honestly think that, I've shared that I lived in a recovery home for almost a year when I was in my 30s. And because of the model that we would talk about, if somebody got discharged or something happened, we'd talk about how it impacted people. And that's really a skill that I don't think that I realized how strong that is, because we often would talk about how were people being impacted by things that were going on and getting reality checks and doing role plays. So I think having that healthy role modeling that many of us have not gotten, and especially in a group environment where I'd like to believe that people felt seen and heard, and if they needed to share, they would. And I think that's a really powerful part of it.
Yeah. And I think that was a big part of our group, not only the role modeling, but just acknowledging people where they were. I think you did like a wonderful job of that. And I think everybody felt heard and seen wherever they were, but at whichever place during any particular group.
Yeah, I just see these groups as being so powerful, and so trying to figure out, how do I communicate that to people? How do I convey while keeping expectations really realistic? Because ultimately, what people can count on is if you show up and if you're willing to share in a way that feels comfortable for you and to let go of the outcome, it could be really transformational. But if you go into it expecting that you're going to connect with everybody in the group and you're going to all be at the same place, you may end up being disappointed. And so how can you show up and get the most out of it without having really high expectations? Because people are hearing about how magical the groups are. And if you go in, it's like if somebody tells you about a movie, about how great it is, and you go in waiting for it to be great, and you're like, that was mediocre.
The hype, you get tainted by the hype or whatever. But I think just by you giving those disclaimers, I think that's, it's like, hey, this is like a situation. Take everything that you can from it and listen to the testimonials and see if you probably, chances are, and I've been watching your testimonials and just like going, yep, that was my experience. That was my experience. Chances are you'll have that experience. We're HSPs too. We like learning and picking up and growing and picking up what we can and getting better. I don't know. I think, but I hear what you're saying. It's also kind of like, should I not?
I'm curious to ask you, I hadn't even thought about this, but you've heard testimonials because you don't know about the other groups and who's in the other groups. So you've heard podcast episodes from people that you don't even know who took the course. How has that been?
That's been really cool because it's like, oh, that's so interesting. Okay, there was a guy. I want to say there's a guy in one of the groups, right?
We had a couple of guys.
Yeah, and another therapist too. I was just like,
there were a handful of therapists that were in the course.
So just listening to that, it was very interesting that we had really similar experiences, but similar but different. So it wasn't like we were all saying the same thing. Like we're all like, oh, let's just push this for Patricia because we really want to like help her get people into her groups. Everyone had like there were very varied experiences, but for each person, it was just so, there was a lot of growth, and there was like, it was just so positive in different ways. So I really like to see how each person had some other little different experience and different little twist to their experience, and to hear about where they grew and what they picked up on the most. And that fascinates me. It's been really cool listening to. I mean, I've heard some of the testimonials from our group, so I kind of got that because I was like, yeah, I saw that person grow like that. Definitely, I saw that one. But from the other group members, like, oh, interesting. Okay, like each group sounds like it was just like they all sounded fascinating.
Yeah, it's been really interesting for me to hear because we don't talk about how the group is for people. We just do the group and then the group ends. And
Yeah.
all of these recordings, I'm just hopping on. And I mean, I don't know if you know what I'm asking you to say, but before we recorded, do you remember what I said to you? I know. Which thing was it?
What am I supposed to say here?
Basically about tell the truth. If you didn't like something, like this is not about you saying what you think I want to hear. It's really about, I want to hear what your experience is.
And I think you said that, or at least I got the feeling that you were that way throughout the group, like with every group module, with whatever the topic was that we were discussing, whatever the homework was, you were always asking for feedback about that. So yeah, I definitely got that. I never felt like we were trying to be pushed to like get something. And I think I may have gotten that in other groups. I'm pretty sure because I as I said, just with other therapy sessions and in other therapy groups, I always had I have to get approval from the person, the facilitator or my therapist. And I never got that here. I mean, I feel like I could be quiet for a whole group if I wanted to, and that would be just fine.
Yeah, like I said, it's really
quite different.
Yeah, it's really about you learning what it is that you need and how you can take care of yourself and honor yourself. It's not about me having an agenda about what you need to be doing or learning or saying. That would just be redonkulous.
Yeah. No, and I think that's exactly what happened during these group sessions. Yeah, it's just like, yeah. And even if somebody was quiet through the whole group session, or if I was, because we observe, we take things in. I'm an introvert, and you explained that whole phenomenon to me so well that, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing. I'm processing what everybody's saying.
Yeah, you're actively engaging. It's just an internal process.
Yes.
And that's really valid. And that's sometimes introverts need more time to take in information, to process, to think about it, to mull it over. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, Kitty, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on with me today. It's been fun not only reconnecting with you, but also just getting a little bit of personal chit-chat time.
It was wonderful.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was wonderful.
Have a great day.
You too.
Hey again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I really had fun talking to Kitty. A couple of pieces of business. If you're interested in the Online HSP course, you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com, go to the HSP groups page. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you can see when the course is being offered. There's a registration button. Because we're running close, there are a couple spots left. You might want to sign up pretty quickly. If you're interested in registering for the free drawing, this is really important. There are 2 pieces of information, and please, I've gotten some registrations and people have not been able to provide both things to me. You want to shoot me an email at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com. You've got to tell me which of the groups you're available to attend. If you do not include that in on your information, I'm not able to reach out back to you and find out which course you're willing to take. And so I really need you to tell me which of the 4 groups you're available to attend. And then on Sunday, I think it's January 12th, I will draw a name from all the people that have signed up, and I will notify you by email. If you're interested, we have a Facebook group that's closed called Unapologetically Sensitive. There's an open page called Unapologetically Sensitive. You can get all the information that you want at my website. If you have any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out to me. I really appreciate each and every one of you. My hope is for this new year that you create exactly what it is that you want. And if there are things that you're struggling with as a highly sensitive person, that you get the tools, the skills, the support, whatever it is, so that you really can live your best life. The world needs us highly sensitive people, and we have gifts to offer the world. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.